Hello and welcome to Excelsior Entertainments. My name is John Owen. How you doing? Welcome to the channel. Now, here we go. Video number 4. I've been mentioning on Facebook and social media about what I'm going to be doing today, which is not necessarily a walk, but we're going to go and investigate and look around at the former Gunpowder Mill, which is down there on Powder Mill Lane and was owned by a company called Kynoch Limited. I have with me here, although I don't know if you can see that on screen, it's my original Amazon Kindle. It's got all the explosion report on, all the statements, the action of the machines, that kind of thing. So I'm going to be referring to that throughout this video and using it as notes. The best thing about that is that it's an original Kindle. That means it's not backlit, there's no light on it, and it's as sunny a day as you can possibly get, and I can read all the text on it. Because as you know, with a smartphone and devices and whatnot, you are constantly either going, I can't see, or you struggle to see the text on screen. So, let's begin. Barnsley has always had a rich and varied history when it comes to the industrial manufacture of items. It is of course best known for its long-standing association with the coal industry. But today we are visiting this former location of one such manufacturer, in the form of Messrs Kynoch Limited, whose manufacturing output was in the field of explosives. The factory stood on this site and dated from the year 1849 and was authorised on the Explosives Act by Continuing Certificate No. 1, dated from the 3rd of February 1876. By the early 1900s, the firm had 10 factories in Birmingham, Kynoch Town in Essex, Barnsley and Ireland, producing explosives, engines, paper, soap, candles, brass, copper and all kinds of shells. So here we are then, we have arrived on the site at the Gunpowder Mill factory. We're on the, I suppose you could say, the lower end of the site. As you can see, I've just come down that pathway there, public footpath, you know, alright, you come to this little sort of bridge here, climb over, and it takes you across and around the other side of this hill where the factory was situated. Now, the explosion in Cartridge Press House at factory number 1, Yorkshire, accident number 164, 1901. To the Right Honourable the Secretary of State for the Home Department. Attending Officer J.H. Thompson, Captain, H.M. Chief Inspector of Explosives. And it reads, Sir, I have the honour to report that I have held an inquiry into the circumstances attending the explosion which occurred on the 25th of May 1901 in the Cartridge Press House of the Gunpowder Factory of Messrs Kynoch Limited, situated at Worsbrough Dale, near Barnsley, by which 2 men lost their lives. A Mr. Abner Wraith, aged 19, born on the 5th of October 1881 in Wombwell, and a Mr. Frederick William Thacker, aged 26. So I've just come round a little bit from that bridge where I was. If you can hear a babbling noise, that is Blacker Dyke, which serviced this gunpowder mill, and it started up there at the top of the hill by the capstone, which we're going up to visit shortly, made its way down this hill and went across and down over in that general direction. And we are at roughly, I would say, the location of where the explosion took place, because in the accident report it is described as a mild explosion, and the 2 men that died actually survived the initial explosion, able to escape what was essentially a large shed, and it says that one of the men tried to make their way up the bank, or banking. So, by default and logic, that says that where this hill is in front of me, the buildings must have been in this general area. There are around here lots of paths leading up to the top of the hill, and I'd like to think that I'm fairly fit, and I have walked up it sort of 3 or 4 times in the past, but it proved to be quite difficult and challenging. So I'm going to make my way around and up from another location. So it's Saturday, May the 25th, 1901, 121 years ago, and the anniversary is coming up very shortly. Also tomorrow and Saturday it is Worsbrough Local History Day, and I will be popping down to have a look around at some of the things going off, as well as the new installations on Park Road near the Rockley Dean Nursing Home.
Okay, so what I'm going to do here then is give you some information and some context to the situation. There was, on Tuesday the 12th of March 1901, so this is 2 months before the explosion, a safety inspection visit by the very same officer, Captain Thompson. Now, Thompson was born Jocelyn Home Thompson in Oxford on the 31st of August 1869. He was a son of the Right Honourable and Most Reverend William Thompson, the Archbishop of York. He was educated at Eton and entered the Royal Academy in 1878, eventually attaining the rank of captain and appointed Chief Inspector of Explosives in 1893. So on the 12th of March he visited, and his report on that day read, "I spent some time examining the cam press and recorded in my notes that the machine was not working at all well. I especially took exemption to the action of the clutch and left an instruction that the latter should be used as little as possible, since the speed of the machine was reduced, and an order was given that only the more experienced man, in brackets Abner Wraith, should use the clutch, but no definite order was given by the manager as to limiting the use of the clutch to cases of emergency." Some other information includes the manager of Kynoch Limited was a John G. Seeley, aged 25, who was born in Argyll, Scotland, and he lived on the site with his wife Carrie and their sister-in-law, Mary Little. Now, the red spot on this image indicates the location of the capstone and where I am right now. Now, one website that I can recommend is the National Library of Scotland. Now, don't be put off by the name Scotland, as this website covers the entire UK. And what you can do, and I will leave a link in the description below, is you go to the website and it will display for you an image of part of the UK that you want to see. And on the left hand side, you'll see a drop down menu with various different old Ordnance Survey maps. And in real time, you pick the map that you want. A spyglass will appear over the current modern image, with the old map overlaid precisely. So, as you can see from this image, I am where the red spot is. The explosion report reads, Saturday, 25th May, 1901. The factory dates from the year 1849 and has been authorised on the Explosives Act by Continuing Certificate No. 1, dated 3rd February 1876. The explosion affected only the building in which it occurred, and therefore it is not necessary to enter any general description of the factory, nor details of the continuing certificate. The building in question was added to in 1883 in virtue of an amended licence granted on the 30th of March that year. This licence authorises its use for making compressed cartridges not containing their own means of ignition, and limits the number of persons to 2, and the quantity of gunpowder to 300 pounds. The building was likely constructed of wood and was divided into 3 compartments. The first of these formerly used for compressing gunpowder pellets for small arms, but this has not been used in some time. The second compartment contained a steam engine for working the presses, and the third, in which the explosion occurred, containing a cam press. The press had only been installed during the present year, and it was purchased from the Royal Gunpowder Factory at Waltham Abbey, and had been converted from a prison press so as to be suitable for pressing blasting cartridges. Now, the following images are of the actual cam presses sold to Kynoch Limited in 1901. They were photographed after an explosion at the Royal Gunpowder Mill at Waltham Abbey on the 13th of December 1893. The images are available for download from the digital archives of the Royal Gunpowder Mill's website, and you can find the link in the description below this video. Now, Captain Thompson goes on to describe the action of the machine, i.e. what a cam press does. Now, it's quite a lengthy read, so what I'm going to do is read the first line out and the last line. And if you want to pause the video and come back when you finish reading, Pause it now. So the first line reads, a hopper situated at the back of the machine is filled up with gunpowder in the form of grain. And the final line reads, the press as a whole can hardly therefore be said to have been working well. On the morning of the accident, the foreman and the two deceased proceeded to the cartridge press house at approximately 8:20 a.m, taking with them about 150 pounds of gunpowder in 2 barrels, which they placed on the floor of the press compartment in front of the press. This was the usual place in which the gunpowder was deposited, and was the most convenient position for replenishing the hop work of the machine. The foreman then left the men, and they proceeded to prepare for the day's work. For this purpose, it would be to commence by thoroughly oiling the plungers and other parts of the press. There are many indications that this is what was actually going on at the moment when the explosion occurred. The interval between the time when the foreman left the building and the occurrence of the accident was about 10 minutes, which would not have been excessive time for operation of preparing the machine for work. The hopper contained no powder, and there was no indication of the explosion of compressed cartridges at the back of the press. The trays in which these had been placed had been thrown down in a heap, without being blackened or ignited. The weighted lever, which works by the charging plate, had been propped up so as to put this part of the machine out of action. The engine was running at the time, but the clutch had been withdrawn so as to bring the machine to rest. The oil can, which when not in use is kept in the engine compartment, was found among the debris at the foot of the mount close to one of the shoes of the deceased men. And at the point where he escaped up the bank, this makes it appear probable that the oil can was actually in his hand at the moment of the explosion. All these indications point to the fact that the actual work had not commenced when the accident occurred, and it may be said with certainty that the powder was not being pressed at the time. The explosion occurred at approximately 8:30 a.m, and it was of so mild a character that several persons working in the factory heard no sound. The manager, however, heard the sound and described it as having resembled the noise of tearing rather than a report of an explosion. The effects on the building also show that it was a rapid combustion of powder rather than a violent explosion. The light walls and roof were thrown down without being shattered. The partition between the press compartment and the engines were blown down, but the further compartment sustained no material damage. Neither the press nor the steam engine was injured, and the latter continued to run after the incident occurred. No damage was done to the other buildings or the factory, nor was debris projected to any considerable distance. The mildness of the explosion may be accounted for by considerable percentage of moisture contained in the powder at this stage of manufacture, and by the fact that it was unconfined. The floor at the back of the press compartment was considerably charred, whereas in the front it was scarcely even blackened. At first sight it would appear from this that the bulk of the powder was at the back of the building, but after careful examination I came to the conclusion that this was not the case, and that the floor at the back had taken fire damage because it was more impregnated with powder dust. It is curious that the lining of the walls and roof shows scarcely any sign of blackening from the explosion. The two deceased were able to escape from the building without assistance, but succumb afterwards to the effects of burning and shock. It is regretted that I had no opportunity of questioning the deceased, who were conscious for some time after the accident. Abner Rafe stated to the manager that he was propping the feed lever, while Thackeray, when asked what he was doing, said he was pulling the lever of the clutch. These statements are perfectly in accord with the evidence afforded by an inspection of the machine and debris. There can be little doubt that Rafe, having finished propping up the lever, gave the order to Thackeray to stop the machine, which the latter immediately did, by throwing out the clutch at the instant the ignition occurred. The cause must therefore be sought in the action of the clutch, and as no other source of ignition offers any reasonable degree of probability, although no powder, had been put in the machine. It is not improbable that in the process of cleaning and preparing for work, dust and grains may have fallen in or near the clutch, and if the lever was slowly withdrawn, the square corners of the clutch would grind over each other, producing local heating and even possible a spark. I consider this quite sufficient to account for the ignition. It is necessary, however, to mention a further statement by Wraith when he was in hospital, to the effect that he saw the first ignition near number 6 punch, and that they had made 6 trays of cartridges previous to the explosion. As the latter part of the statement could not be true, and owing to the short time that had elapsed before commencement of work, and as the deceased was wandering in his mind somewhat at the time, I do not consider much weight to be added to it. At my suggestion, the company, Kynoch Limited, have decided to abandon the use of this form of press, and to revert to the simpler and, in my opinion, safer form which previously was in use in this building. In the majority of private factories, the pressing of blasting cartridges is carried out in an hydraulic press having a large number of plungers. These presses may cost somewhat more to install, but taking into account the frequent delays and repairs necessary with the government form of cam presses, there can be little doubt that not only must the output be greater with the hydraulic machine, but the cost of upkeep and working must be less. The report of 12th of March was far less favourable to the cam press on the occasion of my last inspection to the Worsbrough Dale factory. Captain Thompson then goes on to conclude with the question of blame. The responsibility for the safety of all machinery adopted in the factory for explosives must always rest with the occupiers. In the extreme case of a machine presenting an obvious and acting danger, HM inspectors would exercise their power of prohibiting further use. In the present instance, no such obvious danger was apparent, and therefore no blame can be attributed to the company for adopting a machine which was known to have been in use for many years at the Royal Gunpowder factory, nor does any blame attach to the manager or employees in respect of this accident. It is a matter of regret, however, that my instruction given on Tuesday the 12th of March in regard to limiting the use of the clutch indefinite should not have led to the manager to issue a clear and precise order on the subject as I had intended. Therefore, in conclusion, I must say that I received every possible assistance in my inquiry from the company and from their manager. The coroner's jury returned a verdict of accidental death. I have the honour, sir, your obedient servant, J.H. Thompson, Captain, HM Chief Inspector of Explosives. So there we are, that concludes our story of this tragic event. And as mentioned, this incident should not be confused with a much larger and more devastating explosion that would occur on the same site just 7 years later, on December 11th of 1908. And if enough attention and interest is gained from this video, I'll produce another one on the 1908 explosion. But what of the other players in our story? After suffering a nervous breakdown, aged 48, Captain Thompson committed suicide by shooting himself on Thursday the 13th of February 1908 at his residence in Draycote Place in Chelsea. He was then laid to rest on the 17th of that month in Brompton Cemetery. And for those that are interested, while researching the contents of this video, I produced a PDF including the workings of the cam press, the explosion report, and all the images featured in this video, and if anyone is interested in a copy, then please get in touch via the details on screen and in the description below.
There you go, that's it then. That's today's video, all about the Gunpowder Mill explosion in 1901 at Kynoch Limited, just down there on Powder Mill Lane. Any suggestions, pop them in the description below. I'm off home now. I'm going to cobble this video together and hopefully get you some footage from the Worsbrough Local History Day as well. In the meantime, as I said, if you've liked what you've seen today, like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.